There's a particular kind of wealth that doesn't buy happiness, but instead purchases perfect, suffocating isolation. Ethan Cross had learned this truth the hard way. At 34, he'd built an empire, designing hotels that made people feel at home. Yet he hadn't felt at home anywhere in years. His penthouse suites were architectural marvels, spaces where light and shadow danced in calculated harmony, where every surface whispered luxury. But they were empty, and so was he. Until a woman in nothing but a white towel stumbled through his door, flushed with embarrassment and steam, and shattered the careful walls he'd built around himself. If this story touches your heart, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Comment where you're listening from, and if you feel it was really worth it, consider becoming a member to get early access to upcoming stories. Your support makes all the difference. The Peninsula Hotel in Chicago rose 60 stories above the city, a monument of steel and glass that Ethan himself had redesigned 3 years ago. The executive floor, where he kept a permanent suite, existed in a realm of hushed elegance. Thick carpets swallowed footsteps. Ambient lighting shifted with the time of day, mimicking natural rhythms the wealthy guests rarely experienced anymore. Everything was controlled, curated, perfect. Just like Ethan's life. He stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of Suite 5E804, watching the city lights bleed into the twilight. His reflection stared back, superimposed over the Chicago skyline like a ghost. Tall, lean, sharp features that magazines called striking, but that he'd learned to recognize as intimidating. His dark hair was slightly too long, falling across his forehead in a way his stylist insisted made him look artistic rather than disheveled. He wore tailored black pants and a white dress shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms marked with faint scars from his early days actually building things instead of just designing them. Those days felt like another lifetime. Back when he'd worked with his hands, when he'd believed in partnership, in trust, in the possibility that someone could want him for who he was rather than what he could provide. Before Catherine, before the betrayal that had taught him the most expensive lesson of his life. People didn't love Ethan Cross. They loved his bank account, his connections, his ability to transform their own ambitions into reality. He'd become a walking opportunity, a means to an end, a signature on a contract that could change lives. And he'd learned to accept it, to retreat into his work, into the clean lines and honest materials of his designs. Buildings didn't lie. They didn't pretend. They simply were. The suite around him embodied his philosophy. Minimalist without being cold, luxury expressed through quality rather than excess. The living area featured a custom sofa in charcoal linen, a coffee table of black walnut with a live edge that preserved the tree's natural curve. Built-in shelving displayed architecture books and a few carefully chosen objects, a fossil he'd found as a boy, a fragment of terracotta from a Roman villa, a small bronze sculpture of hands reaching toward each other that he'd bought in Barcelona and immediately regretted for its sentimentality. He'd kept it anyway, hidden it here where no one else would see and ask questions he couldn't answer. His laptop sat open on the dining table, blueprints for the Singapore project glowing on the screen. 6 months of work. A 40-story hotel that would redefine Asian luxury. His partner, Michael, called it a masterpiece. The investors called it a gold mine. Ethan called it another distraction from the persistent, aching awareness that he was 34 years old and had never once come home to someone who was simply happy to see him. He turned away from the window, from his reflection, from the self-pity he despised in himself. The minibar called, offering its usual temporary solution. He'd just pulled out a bottle of Japanese whiskey when he heard the sound. The electronic lock on his door chirped. Not the sound of a keycard being tried and rejected, but the successful beep that meant access granted. Ethan froze, bottle in hand. No one had access to this suite. Not housekeeping without calling first. Not hotel staff. Not even Michael. He'd paid extra for that privacy, for the assurance that this space was his alone. His mind raced through possibilities. Security breach. Wrong room programmed into a keycard. Hotel error. The door swung open, and she stumbled in, wrapped in nothing but a white towel. She was small, maybe 5'3", with damp, dark hair falling in waves past her shoulders. Her skin was flushed pink from what was clearly a recent shower, droplets of water still clinging to her collarbone, her shoulders. The towel was tucked tightly above her breasts, falling to mid-thigh, revealing legs that seemed to go on forever despite her petite frame. She had one hand clutching the towel, the other holding a small toiletry bag. She took 3 steps into the suite before she saw him. They locked eyes. For a moment, neither of them moved. Her eyes were wide, dark amber, the color of honey held up to light. Her lips parted in a small O of shock. A droplet of water traced down her temple, along her jawline, disappearing into the hollow of her throat. Ethan felt something in his chest crack, just slightly. The first fissure in ice he'd thought was permanent. Then reality crashed back. She screamed. Not a horror movie scream, but a sharp gasp of surprise and mortification. The toiletry bag fell from her hand, contents scattering across his carefully designed floor. Shampoo, conditioner, a razor, a small bottle of lotion. Evidence of her very real, very human existence. "I'm so sorry," she stammered, her free hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry." "Wrong room. This is the wrong room. I thought," the spa said. "They gave me a key. I'm so sorry." She was already backing toward the door, her face now red for entirely different reasons. The towel slipped slightly, and she clutched it tighter, which somehow made everything worse, more intimate, more vulnerable. Ethan finally found his voice. "Wait," he said, but it came out rougher than he intended. She flinched. He tried again, softer. "You're okay. It's okay. It's clearly a mistake." But she was already at the door, leaving the scattered toiletries behind like evidence of a crime. "I'll call the front desk. I'm so sorry. Please forget this happened. Please." And then she was gone, the door clicking shut behind her with a finality that somehow felt wrong. Ethan stood in the sudden silence, whiskey bottle still in hand, staring at the closed door. His heart was racing. When was the last time his heart had raced? The suite felt different now, disrupted. A woman in a towel had stumbled into his carefully controlled world for less than 60 seconds, and somehow left it feeling less empty and more lonely all at once. He set down the bottle and crossed to where her things lay scattered on his floor. He knelt, gathering them carefully. The shampoo was an expensive brand, the kind the hotel provided in the spa suites. The lotion was personal, though. Store-bought, practical, the label worn from use. The razor was bright pink, almost cheerful. These weren't the belongings of someone trying to con a billionaire. They were real. She was real. Maya Chen had been having the worst week of her life, and walking into a stranger's hotel room, wearing nothing but a towel, felt like the universe's final joke at her expense. She ran down the emergency stairwell, her bare feet slapping against the cold concrete, her breath coming in embarrassed gasps, her entire body burning with humiliation. This wasn't supposed to happen. None of this was supposed to happen. 3 days ago, she'd been a senior restoration artist at the Art Institute, carefully bringing damaged paintings back to life, with brushes finer than human hair, and patience most people couldn't fathom. She'd had an apartment in Pilsen, small but hers, filled with plants and art supplies, and the comfortable chaos of a creative life. She'd had her dignity. Then the email came. Budget cuts. Position eliminated. Effective immediately. 27 years old, unemployed, with a specialty so specific that job openings appeared maybe twice a year in the entire country. Her landlord, sensing blood in the water, had informed her that her rent was increasing 30% at lease renewal. Her ex-boyfriend, demonstrating his usual impeccable timing, had chosen that week to get engaged to someone else and post it all over social media. So when her oldest friend, Diana, had called from San Francisco and offered to pay for a weekend at the peninsula, a chance to decompress and figure out her next move, Maya had said yes. She'd packed her one good dress, her resume, her portfolio, and a desperate hope that a few days of luxury might help her remember she was worth more than her job title. The spa package was Diana's idea. Full day of treatments, massage, facial, time in the private spa suites with their huge soaking tubs and rainfall showers. Maya had spent 2 hours letting strangers knead the tension from her shoulders and cover her face in mud that probably cost more than her car payment. For a little while, she'd felt human again. The spa attendant had handed her a key card and a towel, had gestured vaguely toward the hallway, and said something about the private relaxation suites. Maya had been half asleep from the massage, her mind fuzzy with lavender oil and meditation music. She'd found what she thought was her suite, had used the key card that had chirped green and welcoming, had stepped inside already unwrapping her robe, and had found him. The man in the suite hadn't looked like a hotel guest. He'd looked like a magazine spread come to life. Tall, probably 6'2", with the kind of lean, controlled build that came from discipline rather than vanity. Dark hair that looked like he'd run his hands through it too many times. A face all angles and intensity, sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass, eyes so dark they looked black in the low light. He'd been holding a bottle of whiskey and staring at her like she was a hallucination. For one suspended moment, Maya had stared back. There was something in his face. Not anger, not disgust. Something that looked almost like wonder, like surprise, like he'd forgotten what it felt like to be surprised. Then her brain had caught up with her situation. She'd screamed, apologized, fled. Now she burst out of the stairwell into the spa level, her heart hammering, her face on fire. The spa attendant looked up from her desk, her professional smile flickering into concern. "Are you all right, Miss Chen?" "I went to the wrong suite," Maya gasped out. "Wrong floor, I think. The key, it worked, but there was someone there. A man. I'm so sorry. I need to get my things." The attendant's face went pale. "Oh no. Oh, I'm so sorry. That shouldn't have. Let me check." She typed rapidly on her computer, her fingers flying. "I gave you the key to 544, the spa relaxation suite. That's the 54th floor. Not the 58th. Maya felt her stomach drop. 58th floor. That was the executive level. The floor that cost more per night than she used to make in a week. The floor where celebrities stayed, where business moguls conducted private meetings, where privacy was purchased at a premium. "I walked into someone's actual suite," Maya said faintly. The attendant looked like she might cry. "I'm so sorry. This is entirely my fault. I must have grabbed the wrong key from the executive housekeeping. They keep the spare key cards for all floors at the desk, and She pressed her hands to her face. "Please don't report this. I could lose my job." Maya's anger evaporated. She'd just lost her own job. She knew exactly what that fear felt like. "I won't report it," she said quietly. "It was an honest mistake. Can I just get my things and go back to my room?" "My actual room," she added with a weak attempt at humor. Of course. The attendant pulled out a new key card, properly programmed this time. "Your relaxation suite is ready. I'm upgrading you to the premium suite. No charge. And please, anything you want from the spa menu for the rest of your stay, complimentary. It's the least we can do." Maya took the key card, managed a smile. "Thank you. That's very kind." But as she made her way to the correct floor, the correct suite, all she could think about was the man she'd seen, the way he'd looked at her. Not with the leering appreciation she'd learned to expect from men when caught at a disadvantage. Not with disgust or anger. With something that looked almost like longing, like she'd interrupted a lonely man in a lonely room, and for just a second, he'd remembered what it felt like to have that loneliness disrupted. She stepped into the real spa suite, locked the door behind her, and leaned against it. The room was beautiful. All white marble and soft lighting, a soaking tub large enough to swim in, heated floors, a daybed piled with plush towels, everything she needed to forget the outside world. But she couldn't stop thinking about his face, about the way he'd said, "Wait," with a voice like gravel and silk, about the expensive suit and the lonely eyes, and the way his hands had tightened around that whiskey bottle, like he was holding on to the only real thing in his life. Maya had always been too curious for her own good. It was what made her good at restoration work, the need to understand how things broke so she could fix them properly. And something in that man had looked broken in a way she recognized. She shook her head, pushed away from the door. It didn't matter. She'd never see him again. He was probably some finance guy, some corporate raider, someone who lived in a completely different world. She had her own disasters to worry about, her own broken life to restore. She drew a bath, poured in half a bottle of the expensive bath oil, and sank into water hot enough to hurt. Tomorrow she'd start sending out resumes. Tomorrow she'd figure out her life. Tonight she'd try to forget that for one brief, mortifying moment, she'd stumbled into a stranger's space and felt something she hadn't felt in months. Seen. The water rose around her, steam filling the room, and Maya closed her eyes. She didn't let herself think about why her toiletries were still scattered across the floor of Suite 5804. Didn't let herself imagine him picking them up, reading the labels, wondering about the woman who'd appeared and disappeared like something from a dream. Didn't let herself acknowledge the tiny, treacherous part of her brain that whispered he looked lonely. And you know what? Lonely looks like. And maybe. But maybe was a luxury she couldn't afford. Maya Chen was unemployed, nearly broke, and running out of time to figure out her life. The last thing she needed was to develop feelings for a stranger in a penthouse suite who'd seen her at her absolute worst. So she sank deeper into the bath, let the water cover everything but her face, and promised herself she'd forget. Except she couldn't forget his eyes, the way they'd looked at her like she was the first real thing he'd seen in a very long time. And somewhere 54 floors above her, Ethan Cross stood in his empty suite, holding a pink razor and a bottle of cheap lotion, feeling the careful architecture of his isolation develop its first real crack. Ethan didn't call the front desk to complain. He should have. A security breach was serious, the kind of thing that demanded investigation, consequences, formal apologies. He'd built a career on understanding how systems worked and how they failed. This was clearly a failure. Someone's carelessness putting both him and that woman at risk. But he didn't call. Instead, he placed her belongings carefully on the entry console, lined them up like artifacts from an archaeological dig. Shampoo, conditioner, razor, lotion. A small bar of hotel soap, still wrapped. A travel toothbrush. The humble essentials of someone who traveled light, who was probably here for business, or maybe a special occasion, saving up for one night of luxury in a life that didn't usually include it. He recognized the signs. Before his first major project sold, before the money changed everything, he'd been that person. He'd spent his 20s working construction by day and designing by night, sleeping in a studio apartment where he could hear every conversation his neighbors had through walls thin as paper. He'd saved for months to attend an architecture conference at a hotel, not unlike this one. Had felt like an imposter the entire time. Certain someone would realize he didn't belong. That memory felt ancient now, buried under years of success and isolation. But looking at her things, he remembered what it felt like to be young and struggling and still hopeful. Remembered the particular vulnerability of existing in spaces designed for people with more money than you'd ever imagined having. His phone buzzed. Michael, his business partner, with the 5th message of the evening about the Singapore project. Ethan ignored it. He poured the whiskey he'd abandoned, took a long drink, and tried to understand why his hands were shaking slightly. It was just a woman, just an accident, just 60 seconds of disruption in his carefully ordered world. Except she'd looked at him. Really looked, not at his suit or his expensive watch or the designer furniture, but at him. Her eyes had widened with embarrassment, yes, but also with something else. Recognition, maybe. Like she'd seen past the surface to something underneath. Or maybe he was projecting. Maybe the loneliness had finally driven him to find meaning in random encounters with strangers. Maybe this was rock bottom. He should throw her things away, let housekeeping handle it in the morning. Instead, he found himself studying the lotion bottle. The label was worn at the edges, like she'd been using it for months. Cocoa butter and shea, nothing fancy. The kind of thing you bought at a drugstore because it worked, and you couldn't justify the expensive alternative. His ex-fiancée, Catherine, used to spend $200 on face cream. Used to make him feel guilty for questioning it, for suggesting that maybe, possibly, the lifestyle she was building on his credit cards was unsustainable. Used to look at him with those cold blue eyes and remind him that if he loved her, really loved her, he'd want her to have nice things. He'd been 28 and stupid enough to believe that love was measured in price tags. The engagement had lasted 6 months. He'd discovered she was sleeping with his former mentor, the man who'd given him his first real architecture job, who'd taught him everything about the business. They'd been planning to start their own firm using Ethan's designs, his connections, his growing reputation. He'd found out when he'd come home early from a site visit and heard them in his bedroom, laughing about how easy he was to manipulate, how grateful he was for attention, how they'd have everything they needed once they pushed him out. He'd walked away, bought them out with money he'd had to borrow against future projects, built his own firm from scratch, this time keeping complete control, trusting no one. The firm had thrived. Ethan had hollowed out. That was 6 years ago. 6 years of perfect isolation, of relationships that lasted exactly as long as both parties found them convenient, of never again making the mistake of confusing access to his life with genuine connection. 6 years of becoming exactly the kind of man who stood alone in a luxury suite, holding a stranger's toiletries and wondering what her laugh sounded like. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was his sister, Emily, texting from Boston, where she was doing her medical residency. Emily, how's Chicago? Emily, Mom wants to know if you're coming for Thanksgiving. Emily, I told her you'd be too busy. Emily, was I right? Ethan smiled despite himself. Emily knew him too well. She was the only person left who remembered what he'd been like before, who still called him out when his isolation got too extreme, who refused to let him disappear completely into his work. He typed back, probably working. Singapore project is complicated. Emily, so that's a no. Emily, you know you're allowed to have a life, right? Emily, actual human connection? Remember that concept? Ethan, says the resident who works 80-hour weeks. Emily, I work with people all day. You work with blueprints. Emily, not the same thing, Emily. When's the last time you went on a date? Ethan looked at the toiletries on his console. 45 minutes ago, technically, though he doubted that counted as a date. More like a collision, a beautiful, mortifying collision. "Ethan, I'm fine. Tell Mom I'll try to make it, Emily." "You won't, Emily." "But I'll tell her anyways, Emily." "Love you, hermit." He set the phone down, Emily's words echoing. When was the last time he'd gone on a date? There'd been Amanda, the gallery owner, 3 months ago. 2 dinners, 1 benefit, 1 night that had been perfectly pleasant and completely forgettable. Before that, Sarah, the lawyer who'd made it clear she was interested in a merger, not a relationship. Before that, a blur of beautiful, successful women who wanted the lifestyle, not the man. None of them had ever stumbled into his space wearing nothing but a towel and looked at him like he was a person instead of a prize. Maya spent the next morning aggressively avoiding the 58th floor. She had breakfast in her room, worked on her resume, sent emails to every museum and gallery in Chicago. She organized her portfolio, updated her LinkedIn, did everything possible to distract herself from the memory of dark eyes and a whiskey bottle and the particular quality of silence in that suite. It hadn't been the cold silence of wealth. It had been the heavy silence of loneliness. She recognized it because she'd been living in her own version for months, since the breakup, since her job became more duty than joy, since she'd realized she'd somehow reached 27 having checked all the boxes, done everything right, and still felt fundamentally adrift. By noon, she couldn't stand her own company anymore. She needed air, movement, distance from her spiraling thoughts. The concierge directed her to the art museum just a few blocks away. Maya walked there through November cold that cut through her coat, grateful for the bite of it, for something real and immediate to feel. The Art Institute was having a special exhibition on Renaissance restoration techniques. Maya wandered through, studying the detailed panels explaining how modern conservators worked to preserve 500-year-old paintings, how they removed centuries of grime and inappropriate previous restorations, how they brought back original colors while respecting the artist's intent. This was her language. This was what she understood. How to fix beautiful broken things without erasing their history. How to honor what was while helping it survive into what would be. She was standing in front of a Caravaggio, studying the restoration notes about shadow technique, when she heard the voice. "They always make it look so clean, don't they? The restoration. Like it's just a matter of removing dirt and everything's perfect again." The voice was rough, cultured, male, familiar in a way that made her spine straighten. But they never talk about what gets lost in the process, the memories, the fingerprints, all the people who touched it along the way. Maya turned. It was him, the man from the suite. He stood 3 feet away, hands in the pockets of a charcoal wool coat, looking at the painting instead of at her. In daylight, he was somehow more and less than he'd been in that low-lit suite. More real, more human, the lines around his eyes deeper, a small scar cutting through his left eyebrow. Less like a photograph, less intimidating. He looked tired. "I wasn't following you," he said, still not meeting her eyes. "I come here most Wednesdays. I didn't know you'd be here." Maya's heart was doing something complicated in her chest. She should leave, walk away, pretend she didn't recognize him. Instead, she heard herself say, "Sometimes the memories need to be lost. Sometimes they're just damage pretending to be history." Now he did look at her. Those dark eyes, curious, intelligent, sad in a way that made her want to understand why. "You're a conservator," he said. It wasn't a question. I was. Until recently. Budget cuts. The museum decided they couldn't justify a specialist position anymore. She didn't know why she was telling him this. Didn't know why it felt natural to be honest with a stranger she'd inadvertently flashed less than 24 hours ago. "I'm sorry," he said, and sounded like he meant it. "I know what it's like to lose work you love. to have someone else decide your value. They stood in silence for a moment, looking at the Caravaggio. The painting showed a young man, Bacchus, half-shadowed, holding a glass of wine. There was something knowing in his expression, something world-weary despite his youth. "My name is Ethan," the man said quietly. Ethan Cross. Maya knew that name. Everyone who worked in architecture, design, or construction knew that name. Ethan Cross, the architect who'd redesigned some of the most famous hotels in the world, who'd won a Pritzker Prize at 31, who was regularly featured in design magazines for his innovative approach to luxury hospitality, who was worth something in the range of several $100 million. She'd walked into a billionaire's suite wearing a towel. Of course she had, because her life was apparently a cosmic joke. "I'm Maya," she said, managing to keep her voice steady. "Maya Chen. And I'm really, really sorry about last night. The hotel gave me the wrong key, and I thought it was the spa suite, and I should have paid more attention, but I just had a massage and I wasn't thinking clearly, and I'm sorry." She realized she was babbling and stopped, feeling her face heat. Ethan almost smiled. Not quite, but close. It softened his face, made him look younger. Human. "It was the most interesting thing that's happened to me in months," he said. "Maybe years." Then he did something unexpected. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small paper bag. "Your things," he said, holding it out. "I thought you might want them back. The spa said they couldn't deliver them without explaining why they needed to, and I thought you'd probably prefer I not mention the incident." Maya took the bag, peeked inside. Everything was there, even the worn lotion, bottle. He'd kept them, returned them personally. Thank you. You didn't have to do that." "I know," Ethan said, "but I wanted to." Another silence, but it didn't feel awkward. It felt full, charged with something Maya couldn't quite name. "Would you like to get coffee?" Ethan asked suddenly, looking almost surprised at himself for asking. "Unless I'm not trying to be weird. You seemed like someone who might understand what it's like to care about fixing beautiful, broken things. And I don't meet many people who understand that." Maya should say no, should recognize this for what it was, a billionaire with obvious money and obvious issues trying to start something with a broke woman who'd literally stumbled into his life wearing a towel. Should protect herself from the inevitable disaster this would become. "I'd like that," she said instead. The coffee shop Ethan chose wasn't the hotel's polished cafe, but a small place 3 blocks away. The kind of spot that served coffee in mismatched mugs and had bookshelves lining the walls. Maya was surprised. She'd expected him to suggest somewhere expensive, somewhere that matched his tax bracket. Instead, they sat at a worn wooden table by the window, watching the city move past, both of them wrapped around coffee that cost $4 instead of $14. "I used to come here when I first moved to Chicago," Ethan said, wrapping his hands around his mug like he needed the warmth. "Back when I was working construction and designing at night. The owner, Mrs. Park, used to let me sit here for hours on one coffee, using the Wi-Fi, spreading my sketches across the table. She never made me feel like I was taking up space. That image didn't fit with the man in the expensive suite, the famous architect." Maya found herself leaning forward, curious despite herself. When was that? 10 years ago. A lifetime. He took a drink, his expression distant. "I was 24, fresh out of a state school architecture program, drowning in student loans, convinced I was going to change the world." Maya smiled. "Did you?" "Change the world?" Ethan looked at her, something unreadable in his eyes. "I changed buildings. I'm not sure that's the same thing." They fell into conversation easily, surprisingly. Maya talked about restoration work, about the satisfaction of bringing damaged beauty back to life, about the particular meditative quality of working with brushes, so fine you could paint individual strands of hair. Ethan talked about architecture as storytelling, about how every building was a conversation between designer and inhabitant, about how hotels were particularly interesting because they had to make thousands of people feel at home without knowing any of them personally. You design spaces for strangers to feel less alone, Maya observed. That's interesting, given that you seem very alone yourself. She regretted the words immediately, but Ethan didn't look offended. He looked considering. I suppose I do, he said, slowly. Maybe that's why I'm good at it. I understand the loneliness I'm trying to solve for. Is it working? Solving it for yourself, I mean. No, Ethan said simply. Not even a little bit. His honesty was disarming. Maya was used to men who performed confidence, who built walls of bravado and success. Ethan seemed to have no walls at all, or maybe walls so thoroughly constructed that he'd forgotten they were supposed to be invisible. Why not? She asked gently. If you understand loneliness, why not fix your own? He turned his mug in slow circles, watching the coffee swirl. Because understanding a problem isn't the same as solving it. I can design a space that makes people feel welcome, but I can't make people actually want to spend time with me rather than what I can provide. He glanced at her, self-deprecating. That sounds self-pitying. I don't mean it that way. I'm aware of the dynamic. Maya studied him. The expensive coat hung on the back of his chair. The watch on his wrist that probably cost more than her car. The way he held himself like someone used to being observed, evaluated, wanted for the wrong reasons. Has anyone ever wanted you for the right reasons? She asked. He was quiet for a long moment. My sister. My parents, when they were alive. A few friends from before all this. He gestured vaguely, encompassing wealth, success, everything that had transformed him. But romantically? No, I don't think so. Maybe once, but I was wrong about that. That must be lonely, Maya said softly. Ethan looked at her, and something in his expression shifted. Not sympathy, but understanding. She wasn't pitying him. She was recognizing something in him that she saw in herself. You understand, he said. It wasn't a question. I do, Maya admitted. Different reasons, but yes. I understand what it's like to feel like people see a version of you instead of actually seeing you. Her ex had loved the idea of her, the artistic girlfriend, the cultured partner he could bring to gallery openings, who made him look sophisticated by association. But when she'd lost her job, when the shine wore off and she was just a woman struggling to pay rent, he'd disappeared. Found someone whose life was still Instagram-worthy. Ethan leaned back, studying her with those intelligent, sad eyes. Why did you agree to coffee with me? You must know who I am, what I'm worth. You could very reasonably assume I'm just another wealthy man trying to leverage money into connection. I could, Maya agreed, but you brought me my toiletries personally. You didn't have to do that. You could have had someone else deliver them or thrown them away, or use the situation to your advantage. She paused, choosing her words carefully. And you looked at me last night like you'd forgotten what it felt like to be surprised. Like you'd been alone so long that even an embarrassing interruption felt like something real. That's the saddest thing anyone's ever said to me, Ethan said quietly. Maya winced. I'm sorry. I didn't mean no, he interrupted. Don't apologize. It's true. It's devastatingly true. And somehow the fact that you see it makes me feel less alone than I've felt in years. They sat with that for a moment, the coffee shop sounds filling the space, the hiss of the espresso machine, the murmur of other conversations, the rattle of cups in saucers. Normal sounds, human sounds, the soundtrack of people existing together without agenda or performance. I'm not looking for a rich boyfriend, Maya said, needing to make it clear. I can't offer you anything except my company. I have about $400 in my checking account and no job prospects. I'm staying at the Peninsula because my friend paid for it as a pity gift, because my life is currently a disaster. If you're looking for someone to fit into your world, I'm not that person." "Good," Ethan said, "because I'm not looking for someone to fit into my world. I'm looking for someone who might help me remember there's a world outside the one I've built." They finished their coffee. Ethan asked about her restoration work, really asked, wanted to understand the techniques, the patience required, the satisfaction of revealing what had been hidden. Maya asked about his designs, about the Singapore project, about what it felt like to see something you'd imagined become real in steel and glass. When they finally left, the afternoon had slipped into early evening. The city lights were coming on, November dark settling over Chicago like a blanket. They walked slowly back toward the hotel, neither quite ready to separate. At the entrance, Ethan stopped. "Can I see you again? Tomorrow, maybe? We could go to the architecture center, or," he hesitated, "or we could just walk. Talk. I don't need it to be anything more than that." Maya should say no, should recognize all the ways this could go wrong, should protect herself from the inevitable complications. "Yes," she said. "Tomorrow. I'd like that." Ethan's smile was small, genuine, transformative. "Tomorrow," he confirmed. And Maya walked into the hotel feeling lighter than she had in months, carrying a paper bag with her toiletries and the strange, fragile sense that maybe her life wasn't as much of a disaster as she'd thought. They fell into a pattern over the next week. Every morning, Maya would find a text from Ethan, simple and without expectation. "Coffee?" Or "Museum today?" Or "Just checking if you're still in Chicago." And every time, despite telling herself this was temporary, that she needed to focus on job hunting, that getting attached to a billionaire architect was the definition of setting herself up for heartbreak, she would say, "Yes." They walked through the city, two people who should have had nothing in common finding that they understood each other with startling clarity. Ethan showed her buildings he'd designed, pointing out details no one else would notice. The way the light hit the facade at sunset, the hidden courtyard designed specifically for hotel staff to take breaks, the lobby layout that encouraged strangers to interact without forcing it. "Every building is a series of choices," he explained, as they stood outside a hotel in River North. "Every choice invites certain behaviors, discourages others. You're trying to predict how people will feel before they even know they're feeling it. It's intimate in its way." Maya understood. It was the same with restoration. You were trying to predict what the artist intended, what time had stolen, what could be recovered, and what was lost forever. They were both in the business of honoring what had been, while shaping what would be. She showed him her portfolio in a coffee shop on their third day together, nervous in a way she couldn't explain. These were paintings she'd worked on, before and after, photos showing her meticulous restoration work. Ethan studied each image with the intensity of someone who understood craft, who recognized the thousands of hours represented in each project. "This one," he said, pointing to a 19th century portrait of a woman. "What did you recover?" "The expression," Maya said. Someone had tried to make her smile more, had painted over the original mouth to look more pleasant, more conventionally beautiful. But the artist had painted her with this slightly melancholy expression, this knowledge in her eyes. I removed the overpainting, brought back the sadness. It made her more beautiful, not less. "Because it made her real," Ethan said, understanding immediately. Real is always more beautiful than perfect. Their conversations ranged from architecture to art to life to loneliness. Ethan told her about his ex, about the betrayal that had taught him to trust no one, about how money had turned him into a target rather than a person. Maya told him about her ex, about job loss, about the particular terror of being almost 30 and feeling like you'd somehow missed the instruction manual for adulthood everyone else received. They talked about their families. Ethan's parents had died in a car accident 5 years ago, 6 months before his career really took off. "Sometimes I wonder if they'd be proud," he said quietly, "or if they'd be worried about what I've become. Isolated, he meant. Wealthy, but alone. Successful, but empty." Maya's parents had emigrated from Taiwan before she was born, had worked brutal hours to give her opportunities they'd never had. They wanted her to be a doctor, she admitted, or a lawyer. Something stable, prestigious, lucrative. Restoration artist wasn't on their approved list. "Do they understand now?" Ethan asked. Maya shook her head. "They try. They love me. But they worry I've wasted my education, that I'll never be financially secure. And now that I've lost my job, they're going to say, 'I told you so,' without actually saying it." "But you love the work," Ethan said. "More than anything," Maya confirmed. "There's something about taking something broken and making it whole again. About being trusted with someone's precious thing and having the skill to fix it. It makes me feel like I matter, like I have a purpose." Ethan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "You do matter. Purpose or no purpose, job or no job. You matter because you're you." It was such a simple statement, but it hit Maya like a physical thing. When was the last time someone had said that to her? That she mattered just for existing, not for what she could do or produce or provide. On their 5th day, it started snowing. Big, fat flakes that turned Chicago into something from a snow globe. They were walking along the river when it started, and without discussion they both stopped, tilting their faces up to catch snowflakes on their tongues, like children. "This is my favorite weather," Maya said, "when the city gets quiet, when everything feels possible." Ethan looked at her, snow catching in her dark hair, her eyes bright with cold, and something that might have been joy. She was wearing a coat that was slightly too thin, a knitted hat with a pom-pom that was slightly ridiculous, boots that had seen better days. She was imperfect and real and the most beautiful thing he'd seen in years. "Can I kiss you?" he asked, the words escaping before he could overthink them. Maya's breath caught. They'd been dancing around this, the growing attraction neither wanted to name, the way their hands brushed when they walked, the way she'd catch him looking at her with hunger and wonder mixed together, the way she found herself thinking about him at night, alone in her hotel room, wondering what it would feel like to be held by those careful, skilled hands. "Yes," she said. "Please." Ethan stepped closer, his hands coming up to frame her face. His palms were warm against her cold cheeks, his touch gentle, reverent, like she was something precious. He looked at her for a long moment, giving her time to change her mind, to pull away. Then he kissed her. It was soft at first, questioning, his lips barely brushing hers. Maya made a small sound, her hands coming up to grip his coat, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, became something more certain, more real. He tasted like coffee, and something else, something that might have been hope. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "I haven't kissed anyone in over a year," he admitted. "Not like that. Not like I meant it." Maya's hands were still gripping his coat. "I haven't felt anything in over a year. Not like this. Not like it matters." They stood like that in the falling snow, the city moving around them, two lonely people discovering that maybe loneliness wasn't permanent after all. "My friend's wedding is in 3 days, Maya said suddenly. "The one who paid for my hotel room. She's getting married in San Francisco and I'm supposed to fly out for it." Her heart sank even saying it. She'd forgotten about the wedding, had gotten so caught up in these stolen days with Ethan that she'd pushed aside the fact that this was always temporary. She had to leave. And he had a life here, a business, obligations. "Come back," Ethan said urgently. "After the wedding, come back to Chicago." Maya pulled back to look at him. "For what?" she asked, needing to hear him say it. "For me," Ethan said. "For this. Whatever this is, I don't want it to end because of geography or timing, or because we're both too afraid to see where it goes." The vulnerability in his face was staggering. This was a man who didn't ask for things, who'd learned not to need, who'd built walls so high he'd forgotten what it felt like to want to let someone in. And here he was, asking, begging almost. "I live in Chicago," Maya said slowly. "I just need to find a new job. Until I do, I can't really afford to," Ethan interrupted. "Stay at my place, not the hotel suite, my actual home. I have a house in Lincoln Park, too big for one person. You could have your own space, no pressure, just stay. Let me help you while you job hunt. Let me see where this goes without a deadline." Maya should say no, should recognize the red flags, the power imbalance, the risk. But she looked at his face and saw only honesty, only hope, only a lonely man who'd found someone who saw him and didn't want to lose that. "Okay," she said. "I'll come back." Ethan's house in Lincoln Park was a revelation. From the outside, it looked like the other historic homes on the tree-lined street, brick and ivy, respectable but not ostentatious. Inside, it was pure Ethan. Floor-to-ceiling windows that let in floods of natural light. Open spaces that flowed into each other without feeling empty. Furniture that was beautiful but comfortable, clearly chosen to be used rather than admired. Built-in bookshelves filled with architecture texts, novels, art books. A kitchen that was clearly designed by someone who actually cooked. It felt like a home, not a showpiece. Maya arrived on a Tuesday evening, one suitcase containing everything she owned, her heart in her throat. Ethan opened the door before she could knock, like he'd been waiting. "Your room is upstairs," he said, grabbing her suitcase. "Second door on the left. Private bathroom, lots of light. There's a desk if you need to work." But he hesitated, looking younger suddenly, uncertain. "But if you want to sit downstairs, if you want company, I'll be in the living room, just reading. No pressure." Maya followed him up, taking in the details. Photos on the walls, mostly of buildings, but some of people. A younger Ethan with a woman who had to be his sister, both of them laughing. An older couple, his parents probably, standing in front of a house that looked nothing like this one. The guest room was beautiful. A large bed with white linens, wide windows overlooking a small garden, a desk positioned perfectly to catch the afternoon light. An entire bookshelf, empty, waiting. "I thought you might want space for your things," Ethan said, setting her suitcase down gently. "And there's a studio in the basement, if you want it. Previous owner was a painter. North light, ventilation, the whole setup. I don't use it. It's just sitting there." "You thought of everything," Maya said softly. "I wanted you to feel like you could stay," Ethan admitted. "Like this was a place you could live, not just visit." They stood looking at each other across the guest room, the weight of what they were attempting settling over them both. Then Maya crossed the space and kissed him. Soft and sure, a promise that she was here, that she meant it. They fell into a rhythm over the next weeks. Maya would wake early, make coffee, spread her resume and portfolio across the dining table. Ethan would join her, working on his laptop, occasionally reaching across to refill her cup without her having to ask. They'd work in comfortable silence, the kind that only came when two people were secure enough in each other's presence that they didn't need to fill every moment with words. In the evenings, they'd cook together. Ethan was surprisingly good in the kitchen, approaching recipes with the same precision he brought to architecture. Maya was more intuitive, tasting and adjusting, working without measurements. They balanced each other, created meals that were better than either could have made alone. After dinner, they'd sit on the couch, reading, or watching old movies, or just talking. Ethan would tell her about his day, about the Singapore project, about the investors who wanted to change his design, and how he was fighting to preserve the integrity of the work. Maya would tell him about job applications, about rejection emails, about the slowly deflating hope that she'd find something in her field. And then one evening, 3 weeks after she'd moved in, Ethan brought home a package. "I need your opinion on something," he said, setting a laptop on the coffee table. "It's for the Singapore project. The hotel will have a permanent art collection, pieces in every room. I want to commission restoration work for antique pieces rather than buying new, generic art. Make it feel like a place with history, even though it's brand new." Maya leaned forward, interested. "That's a beautiful idea." Ethan pulled up files. "I've sourced about 200 pieces. Paintings, sculptures, textiles. All damaged, all authentic, all with stories. But I need someone to oversee the restoration, coordinate with local artisans, ensure quality, maintain artistic integrity. Full-time position, 1-year contract with possibility of extension. Based in Singapore for 6 months, remote for 6 months. It would pay well, very well, and it would establish you as an expert in hotel art curation." Maya's heart started beating faster. This was her dream job, exactly the kind of work she'd always wanted, the perfect blend of restoration and curation and creative control. Then she understood. "You created this position for me." Ethan met her eyes. "I created a position I needed filled. The fact that you're perfect for it doesn't make it less real. But yes, I thought of you when I was planning it. I thought about how you talk about restoration, about honoring history while creating something new. That's exactly what I'm trying to do with this hotel." Maya stood up, suddenly needing distance. "I can't take a job you created for me. That's charity. It's manipulation." "I'm offering you a job you're qualified for," Ethan said, his voice careful. "A job that needs doing, whether you take it or not. If you say no, I'll hire someone else. But they won't be as good as you, and they won't care as much, and the project will suffer for it. You're using our relationship to what? Buy my gratitude? Keep me around?" Maya's voice was rising, all her fears about the power imbalance, about being kept, about losing herself in someone else's wealth, bubbling up. "I'm trying to help you," Ethan said, standing to face her. "I'm trying to give you the chance you deserve. The chance that was stolen from you by budget cuts and bad luck. Why is that so terrible? Because I need to know you want me, not a kept woman who owes you everything," Maya shouted. "I need to know this is real, not just you solving a problem with money like you solve everything else." The words hung in the air between them, harsh and true. Ethan stepped back like she'd hit him. "Is that what you think?" he asked quietly. "That I'm trying to buy you? That this is just another transaction?" "I don't know what to think," Maya said, and hated that her voice broke. "I don't know how to separate who we are from what you can provide. And I hate that. I hate that your money makes everything complicated. I hate that I can't just be grateful. I hate that I'm standing in your beautiful house, living rent-free, falling in love with you, and wondering if any of this is real." Ethan went very still. "You're falling in love with me?" Maya's breath caught. She hadn't meant to say that. But it was true, had been true for weeks. Maybe since that first kiss in the snow. Maybe since he'd looked at her in the art museum and understood what it meant to fix beautiful broken things. "Yes," she whispered. "I am. And that terrifies me." Ethan crossed the space between them in 2 strides, his hands framing her face, his eyes intense. I'm falling in love with you, too. Have been since you stumbled into my hotel room and looked at me like I was a person instead of a bank account. And yes, I have money. Yes, I'm trying to help you. But not because I want to own you or obligate you. Because I can't stand watching someone I love struggle when I have the power to change that. Because giving you this job isn't manipulation. It's me using my resources to do something good for once, instead of just accumulating more emptiness. Maya was crying now, frustrated tears she couldn't stop. I don't want to lose myself in you. I don't want to become someone who needs to be saved. You don't need to be saved, Ethan said fiercely. You're not broken. You're not failing. You're navigating a disaster. That wasn't your fault. And you're doing it with more grace and strength than anyone I've ever met. Taking help doesn't make you weak. It makes you smart. And for what it's worth, you've saved me far more than I could ever save you. That's not true, Maya protested weakly. It is, Ethan insisted. You've given me something to come home to. You've made this house feel like a home instead of another expensive box I exist in. You see me, Maya. You see past the money and the success and all the shit I've built around myself. And you still choose to be here. Do you have any idea how rare that is? How precious? They stood like that, foreheads pressed together, breathing each other's air, both of them terrified and hopeful in equal measure. Take the job or don't, Ethan said softly. I'll support either decision. If you want to find something else, something that has nothing to do with me, I'll help you network, write recommendations, whatever you need. But please don't reject an incredible opportunity because you're afraid of what it means for us. We can figure out the US part separately. Can we? Maya asked. Can it really be separate when everything you offer comes wrapped in money I don't have? Ethan pulled back to look at her. What do you want from me, Maya? What would make this feel real to you? I want to contribute, she said. I want to pay rent or buy groceries or something. I want to feel like an equal partner, not a charity case. Starting next month, you pay $500 in rent, Ethan said immediately. I know that's below market value, but it's what you can afford right now, and having you here is worth more to me than market rate. You buy groceries when you can. When you can't, I do. We take turns cooking. We split housework. We figure it out like adults who care about each other. And if you take the Singapore job, you'll be making your own money, building your own career, standing on your own feet. I'm not trying to keep you dependent. I'm trying to help you get independent. Maya searched his face, looking for manipulation, for control, for any sign that this was about power rather than love. She found only honesty, only hope, only a man who'd been alone so long that he'd forgotten how to accept help himself and was now clumsily trying to offer it to someone else. Okay, she said finally. Okay, to which part? Everything. The rent, the job, figuring it out together. She paused, then said it clearly. No more hiding. I love you, Ethan. I'm scared, and I don't know how this works, but I love you. Ethan kissed her then, deep and hungry and real. When they finally broke apart, he said, I love you too, and I'm just as scared. But I'd rather be scared together than safe alone. That night, Maya didn't sleep in the guest room. They moved slowly, carefully, both of them aware of how much trust this required. Ethan's bedroom was on the 3rd floor, a space she'd never seen. It was smaller than she expected, cozier. The bed was large, but not ostentatious, covered in soft gray linens. More windows, because of course there were, letting in moonlight that painted everything silver. They undressed each other with a reverence that felt almost sacred. Ethan's hands shook slightly as he traced the curve of her hip, the line of her spine. Maya's breath caught when she saw him fully, all lean muscle and old scars and careful strength. "Are you sure?" Ethan asked, his voice rough. "We don't have to. We can wait. I don't want you to feel pressured." "I'm sure," Maya said. "I want this. I want you." What followed was slow, careful, achingly tender. Ethan touched her like she was precious, like he couldn't believe she was real, like he was memorizing every response, every sound, every way she moved against him. Maya let herself be vulnerable in a way she'd never been before, trusting him with her body, with her pleasure, with the complicated tangle of emotions that made her feel simultaneously powerful and completely exposed. When he finally entered her, they both gasped, the sensation overwhelming not because of physical intensity, but because of what it meant. This was trust. This was choosing each other. This was two lonely people deciding that maybe, possibly, loneliness didn't have to be permanent. Afterward, they lay tangled together, sweat cooling on skin, hearts gradually slowing to something approaching normal. Ethan's hand traced lazy patterns on Maya's back. She could feel him thinking, could sense the words building. "I was engaged once," he said quietly. "Catherine. I thought she loved me, thought we were building something real. Then I discovered she was using me for money and connections, planning to push me out of my own firm once she'd taken everything she needed." Maya pressed closer, offering comfort without words. "It broke something in me," Ethan continued. "Made me believe that no one would ever want me for me, that my money had ruined any chance of genuine connection, that I was destined to be alone or constantly wondering if I was being used." "I'm not using you," Maya said fiercely. "I know," Ethan said, and there was wonder in his voice. "That's what terrifies me. Because if you're real, if this is real, then I have something to lose again. And I don't know if I'm strong enough to survive losing it." "You won't lose me," Maya promised. "Not unless you push me away. And maybe not even then. I'm stubborn." Ethan laughed, the sound soft and genuine. "I've noticed." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other. Two people who'd been alone so long that togetherness felt both natural and miraculous. In the morning, Maya woke first. Dawn light filtered through the windows, painting Ethan's face in shades of gold. Asleep, he looked younger, the lines of worry and loneliness smoothed away. She watched him breathe, this brilliant, broken, beautiful man who'd somehow stumbled into her life at exactly the moment they both needed someone to see them. She thought about the job offer, about Singapore, about the chance to build a career on her own terms, to prove she could stand on her own feet, about the fact that it was a real job, one that needed doing, one she was qualified for regardless of their relationship. She thought about her parents, what they'd say about her living with a man she'd known for barely a month, about her ex, who'd left the moment she'd stopped being convenient, about every time someone had made her feel small, inadequate, not enough. And then she thought about Ethan, who'd seen her at her most embarrassed and most vulnerable, and had chosen to know her better, who'd spent weeks showing her that wealth didn't have to mean coldness, that success didn't have to mean isolation, who'd offered help not as control, but as partnership. She'd take the job, not because she needed saving, but because it was the opportunity she deserved. And she'd make it her own, build something she could be proud of, prove to herself and everyone else that Maya Chen was more than her job loss, more than her breakup, more than the disasters that had defined her year. Ethan's eyes opened, focused on her face. "Good morning," he said, voice rough with sleep. "Good morning," Maya replied. "I've been thinking about Singapore." "And?" "I'm taking the job," she said. "On my terms. I want full creative control over the restoration choices. I want credit in the hotel's marketing materials. I want to build a relationship with the Singapore art community, not just fly in and dictate terms. And I want it clear that I was hired for my expertise, not because I'm sleeping with the architect." Ethan smiled, pulling her closer. "Done. All of it. Anything else?" Maya kissed him, slow and sweet. "Just this. Just you. Just the promise that we figure out the rest as we go." "Deal," Ethan said. Singapore was a revelation. Maya arrived in February to a wall of heat and humidity that immediately curled her hair. The city was green and gleaming, an impossible blend of ultra-modern skyscrapers and lush vegetation, everything growing upward together. The hotel Ethan had designed was halfway through construction, a 40-story tower in the Marina Bay area that would redefine luxury in Southeast Asia. Maya spent her first week meeting with the construction foreman, the interior design team, and the curator Ethan had hired to help source the antique pieces. Then she got to work. The collection was extraordinary. Paintings from colonial-era Singapore, Chinese scrolls, Indonesian textiles, Malaysian wood carvings. Each piece had a story, a history, a voice that had been silenced by damage and neglect. Maya's job was to help them sing again. She set up a restoration studio in a converted warehouse near the construction site, hired local artisans, specialists in traditional techniques, built a team of 6 people who understood that restoration was as much about respect as skill. They worked long hours, carefully removing overpainting, repairing tears in ancient silk, stabilizing cracking wood. Maya would lose herself in the work, hours passing in meditative focus, her hands steady, her mind clear. This was what she was meant to do. This was who she was. Ethan visited every 3 weeks, flying in for project meetings, staying in Maya's small apartment in the River Valley neighborhood. They'd fall into each other with the desperate intensity of people who were still learning how to be together, who missed each other with physical ache. He'd tell her about Chicago, about Emily's latest medical drama, about the projects he was balancing. She'd tell him about the collection, about the pieces she was bringing back to life, about the satisfaction of building something beautiful from components that had been scattered and broken. "You're glowing," he said one night, watching her cook in her tiny kitchen. "You're happy." "I am," Maya admitted. "This work, this team, being here, it feels right. I feel like myself again." "I'm glad," Ethan said, and meant it. Even though it meant 6,000 miles between them, even though it meant learning to love someone from a distance, he was glad she'd found herself. Because that was the point. Not keeping her close, but helping her fly. They made it work. Video calls every day, texts throughout, care packages sent both directions, Maya sending him coffee from local roasters, Ethan sending her art supplies she couldn't find in Singapore. It wasn't perfect. They missed each other, had arguments about time zones and missed calls, and the particular loneliness of sleeping alone after you'd learned what it felt like to sleep together. But they made it work because the alternative, giving up, losing this, was unthinkable. In June, Maya flew back to Chicago for a week. The house in Lincoln Park felt like coming home. Ethan had left flowers in her room, fresh linens, stocked the fridge with her favorite foods. They spent 3 days barely leaving the bedroom, relearning each other's bodies, making up for months of separation. On the 4th day, they took a walk through Millennium Park. It was summer now, the city hot and humid, crowds of tourists photographing the bean, children splashing in the fountain. They found a quiet spot on the grass, lay side by side looking up at the sky. "I have something to tell you," Maya said, "and I need you to not freak out." Ethan propped himself up on one elbow, immediately worried. "What is it? Are you okay?" "I'm fine," Maya assured him. "Better than fine. But the Singapore contract is ending in 6 months, and I've been thinking about what comes next." "Okay," Ethan said carefully. "And?" and I've been offered a position, Director of Art Conservation at the Singapore National Museum. It's permanent. It's prestigious. It's everything I could want professionally. Ethan went very still. "That's incredible," he said, and his voice sounded genuine, even as Maya could see him calculating what this meant. They'd planned for her to come back to Chicago after the hotel contract ended, planned to finally live in the same city, the same house, the same life. "But this is Singapore," Ethan continued. "Permanent means not Chicago." "I know," Maya said quietly, "and I don't know what to do. Because I want the job. It's my dream position. But I want you more, and I don't know how to have both." Ethan lay back down, staring at the sky. His hand found hers in the grass, fingers intertwining. "Tell me about the job," he said. "What would you be doing?" Maya described it. Overseeing a team of 12 conservators, managing a collection of over 10,000 pieces, setting policy for how Singapore approached art preservation, teaching, lecturing, traveling to conferences, building something that would outlast her, a program that would train the next generation of conservators throughout Southeast Asia. "You have to take it," Ethan said. "That's not a job. That's a legacy." "But what about us?" Maya asked, voicing the fear she'd been carrying for weeks. "What about the life we were building?" Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I can open a Singapore office. I've been thinking about expanding internationally anyway. And I can design from anywhere. I don't have to be in Chicago full-time." Maya sat up, looking down at him. "You'd move to Singapore? For me?" Ethan sat up too, taking both her hands. "I'd move anywhere for you. Chicago, Singapore, the middle of nowhere. Geography doesn't matter. You matter. This, us, whatever we're building together, that matters. Everything else is just details." "Are you sure?" Maya asked. "Your whole life is in Chicago. Your house, your office, Emily." "My life is with you," Ethan said simply. "Emily's in Boston anyway. The house is just a building. The office is just a business. But you, us, this is real. This is what matters. And I'm not losing you because of something as stupid as location." They kissed there in Millennium Park, surrounded by tourists and summer heat, and the possibility of a future neither of them had planned, but both of them wanted. That night, over dinner at a small Thai restaurant near the house, they made lists. What it would look like for Ethan to split time between Chicago and Singapore. How they'd handle the logistics of 2 careers, 2 cities, 2 lives that were becoming one. Whether they'd keep the Chicago house or sell it, whether they'd rent or buy in Singapore, whether this was crazy or brave or both. "You know what's funny?" Maya said, twirling pad thai around her fork. "What?" "When I walked into your hotel room wearing that towel, I thought it was the most embarrassing moment of my life. I thought I'd never recover. And now, it's the best thing that ever happened to me." Ethan reached across the table, taking her hand. "Best thing that ever happened to me, too. I was so lonely before you. I didn't even realize how lonely until you showed me what it felt like to not be alone." "Do you ever worry," Maya asked, "that we moved too fast? That this is all happening too quick?" "Every day," Ethan admitted. "But then I think about the alternative. Going slow, being cautious, missing this because we were too afraid to jump. And that seems worse. So I'd rather jump and be scared than play it safe and lose you." They flew back to Singapore together 2 days later. Ethan stayed for 3 weeks, working from Maya's apartment, meeting with potential contractors for the Singapore office, learning the city. Maya watched him adapt, watched him make space in his life for her dreams, watched him choose her over the comfortable isolation he'd perfected. And she fell deeper in love. By September, Ethan had opened a small satellite office in Singapore, staffed it with 3 local architects, and was splitting his time roughly 60-40 between Chicago and Asia. It was exhausting. The time zones were brutal. The travel wearing. The constant adjustment between locations and cultures and mindsets. But it worked. They worked. Maya thrived in her new role at the National Museum. She was building something that mattered, teaching people who were hungry to learn, preserving history while shaping the future. Ethan watched her bloom into her full confidence, watched her go from the uncertain woman who'd stumbled into his hotel room to someone who commanded respect and admiration from internationally recognized experts. She didn't need him anymore, not in the way she had in Chicago, when she was broke and desperate. She had her own money now, her own career, her own life. And somehow, that made their relationship stronger, not weaker. Because she stayed, not because she needed to, but because she wanted to. They moved into a small apartment together in the Tiong Bahru neighborhood, a space that was theirs, not his or hers. They furnished it together, blending their tastes, their possessions, their lives. Ethan taught Maya to see buildings the way he did, to understand how spaces shaped behavior. Maya taught Ethan to see art the way she did, to understand how preservation was an act of love. They had their first real fight in October. Ethan had been in Chicago for 3 weeks, delayed by complications with a Boston project. Maya had felt neglected, unimportant, questioning whether this arrangement was sustainable. They'd argued over video chat, both exhausted, both frustrated, both scared that the distance was too much. "I can't do this forever," Maya had said, tears streaming. "I can't keep wondering if you're coming back, if this is real, if I'm enough to keep you coming back." "You are enough," Ethan had insisted. "You're everything. But I have obligations, projects that can't be managed remotely, a business I've spent years building. I'm trying to balance it all, and I'm failing, and I don't know how to fix it." "Then maybe this doesn't work," Maya had said, the words ripping out of her even as she didn't mean them. Maybe we were kidding ourselves that we could make this work. They'd hung up angry, both of them miserable, both of them certain they'd just destroyed the best thing in their lives. Ethan had gotten on a plane 6 hours later, landed in Singapore at 2 in the morning, showed up at their apartment exhausted and rumpled and desperate. "I quit," he'd said when she opened the door. "What?" Ethan walked in, dropping his bag. "I sold my share of the Chicago firm to Michael. He'd been wanting to buy me out for years. I'm keeping the Singapore office, building it into something real, and I'm here. Permanently. No more back and forth, no more choosing. I choose you, Maya. I choose us. You can't quit your whole life for me," Maya had protested, even as relief flooded through her. "I'm not quitting my life," Ethan said. "I'm choosing what my life is. And it's here, with you. Building something new, instead of holding on to something that was killing me slowly." They'd made love that night, with an urgency that felt like reclaiming each other, like promising this was real, this was permanent, this was worth the sacrifice. In the morning, wrapped in sheets and contentment, Maya had asked, "Are you sure? Are you really sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything," Ethan had replied. "Chicago was where I was. Singapore is where I want to be." By December, they'd settled into a rhythm that felt sustainable. Ethan's Singapore office was growing, taking on interesting projects throughout Southeast Asia. Maya's work at the museum was garnering international attention. They'd hosted Ethan's sister Emily for Thanksgiving, which Singapore didn't celebrate, but they'd observed anyway with turkey and stuffing in their tiny apartment, Emily laughing at their domesticity. "You two are disgustingly happy," she'd said, toasting them with cheap wine. "It's nauseating. I'm so proud of you." On Christmas Eve, they took a walk through the Botanic Gardens. Singapore was decorated for the holidays despite the tropical heat. Lights strung through palm trees, carols playing in shopping malls, the cognitive dissonance of winter holiday imagery in a place that never saw winter. They found a quiet spot near the Swan Lake, sat on a bench, watching the water reflect the lights. "Maya," Ethan said quietly, "there's something I want to talk about." Maya's heart started pounding. She knew that tone. This is it, she thought. He's changed his mind. The sacrifice was too much. He's going back to Chicago. "I've been thinking," Ethan continued, and he was nervous. She could see it in the way his hands moved, the way he couldn't quite meet her eyes. "About what we're building here, about the life we've created, about the fact that I wake up every morning grateful you exist and terrified something will take you away from me." He finally looked at her. "I don't have a ring. I thought about buying one, but that seemed presumptuous, and I know you have opinions about jewelry, and I didn't want to get it wrong. But I need to ask you anyway, because I can't wait anymore, and I don't want to." Maya's breath stopped. Ethan took her hands, holding them between his. "Maya Chen, will you marry me? Will you legally bind yourself to a formerly lonely architect who loves you more than he thought he could love anything? Will you let me spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you?" "Yes," Maya said, laughing and crying simultaneously. "Yes, absolutely yes. You already deserve me, you idiot. You've always deserved me." They kissed in the Botanic Gardens on Christmas Eve, two people who'd stumbled into each other's lives by accident and chosen each other deliberately every day since. When they finally pulled apart, Maya said, "I'm buying my own ring." Ethan laughed. "I wouldn't expect anything less." They walked home through the decorated streets, planning. A small wedding? Maybe here? Maybe Chicago? Maybe somewhere entirely new. Emily would be maid of honor. Michael would be best man. Maya's parents would be confused, but loving. They'd figure it out. Everything was figure-outable when you had the right person beside you. Later that night, lying in bed, Ethan traced patterns on Maya's shoulder. "Do you ever think about how it started?" he asked. "With you stumbling into my room wearing a towel?" "All the time," Maya admitted. "It was so mortifying. But also, I think about the look on your face. You weren't horrified, or angry, or leering. You looked surprised, like you'd forgotten what surprise felt like." "I had," Ethan said. "I'd controlled everything so tightly that nothing could surprise me anymore. And then, you appeared, completely unplanned, completely real, and broke through everything I'd built to keep people out." Maya smiled. "Best wrong room I ever entered." "Best intrusion I ever experienced," Ethan agreed. They fell asleep like that, engaged, committed, choosing each other. Two people who'd been so lonely they'd forgotten what connection felt like, who'd found each other through accident and luck and the particular magic of being willing to be vulnerable enough to let someone in. They got married in April, in a small ceremony at the Singapore Botanic Gardens where he'd proposed. 50 people, a mix of friends and family from 2 continents, gathering under a heritage rain tree that had witnessed 100 years of the city's transformation. Maya wore a simple silk dress, cream-colored, elegant without being fussy. Ethan wore a tailored suit, charcoal gray, his hands shaking slightly as he waited for her to walk down the aisle. Emily cried through the entire ceremony. Maya's parents sat in the front row, her mother dabbing her eyes, her father stoic but proud. He'd pulled Maya aside before the ceremony and said in Mandarin, "This man looks at you like you are the sun. Don't let him go." "I won't, Baba," Maya had promised. The ceremony was short, personal. They'd written their own vows. Maya went first, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "Ethan, When I stumbled into your hotel room wearing only a towel, I thought I was at my lowest point. Unemployed, broke, embarrassed beyond belief. But you looked at me like I was the most interesting thing you'd seen in years. You saw me when I felt invisible. You believed in me when I'd stopped believing in myself. You gave me space to become who I was meant to be. I promise to keep seeing you, really seeing you, not your success, or your money, or the impressive things you build, but the man who fixes broken instruments and brings me coffee and chooses me every single day. I promise to be your partner, your equal, your home. I love you. I choose you. Always. Ethan's voice was rougher when it was his turn, thick with emotion. Maya, I spent years believing I was destined to be alone, that my wealth had made genuine connection impossible, that I'd never find someone who wanted me instead of what I could provide. And then you appeared, completely by accident, and you stayed not because of what I had, but because of who I was. You challenged me, argued with me, refused to let me use money to solve problems that required emotional courage. You made me braver. You made me believe I deserved love. I promised to keep choosing you over comfortable isolation, to keep building a life together instead of hiding in the safe spaces I design, to keep showing up, being present, being vulnerable. You are the best surprise of my life. I love you. I choose you. Forever. They exchanged rings, simple bands they'd designed together. When the officiant pronounced them married and they kissed, the applause from their small gathering felt like the whole world celebrating. The reception was in a restaurant overlooking the city, casual and joyful. Emily gave a toast that made everyone laugh and cry. My brother spent most of his adult life convinced he was too damaged to be loved, too guarded, too wealthy, which sounds like a ridiculous problem, but I promise you, it was real. He built walls so high, I thought I'd never see him truly happy. And then Maya crashed into his life, literally, and somehow saw past all of it. She didn't save him. That's not what this is. But she saw him clearly enough that he could start saving himself. To Maya and Ethan, to crashing into the right person at the right time, to love that's brave enough to be real. Michael toasted next, raising his glass. Ethan called me at 3 a.m. once to tell me he'd met someone who looked at him like he was a person instead of a portfolio. He was terrified, certain it couldn't last. But here we are. Maya, thank you for loving my best friend. Ethan, thank you for finally letting yourself be loved. May you build beautiful things together for the next 60 years. Maya's father stood, which surprised everyone. His English was halting but heartfelt. My daughter, she always has big heart. Always want to fix things, make beautiful. I worry she never finds someone who understand, but this man, he understand. He see her. In Chinese, we have saying, Yuan Fen, means destiny, but also choice. You have destiny to meet, but you choose to stay. This is best kind of love, both destiny and choice. Congratulations. They danced badly to music from both cultures. Ate too much, drank champagne in the tropical heat, took photos they'd treasure. And when the night ended, they went home to their little apartment in Tiongba-ru as husband and wife, two people who'd found each other through accident and built something real through intention. That first year of marriage was an adjustment, living together permanently, navigating shared finances, learning each other's rhythms in a new context. They had fights about housework, about in-laws, about whose turn it was to cook. Normal fights. The kind that came from building a shared life, not from fundamental incompatibility. Ethan's Singapore office thrived. He was designing a museum in Kuala Lumpur, a luxury resort in Bali, a cultural center in Ho Chi Minh City, His work evolved, becoming more focused on cultural preservation, on buildings that honored history while embracing modernity. Maya saw her influence in his designs, in the way he thought about stories and memory. Maya's career flourished. She published papers on Southeast Asian restoration techniques, was invited to lecture in Paris, Tokyo, New York, built a program at the National Museum that became a model for the region. She'd gone from unemployed to internationally recognized in 3 years. Sometimes she couldn't believe this was her life, but mostly she just lived it. They traveled together when they could, exploring the region. Took cooking classes in Bangkok, hiked in the Cameron Highlands, spent a week in a beach bungalow in the Philippines with no internet, just each other and books and the sound of waves. "I'm happy," Maya said one night, lying on the beach watching stars. Like, actually happy? Not pretending, not waiting for the other shoe to drop, just happy. "Me too," Ethan said, pulling her closer. "I didn't know I could be this happy." On their first anniversary, they returned to the Botanic Gardens where they'd married, sat on the same bench where he'd proposed without a ring. "I got you something," Ethan said, pulling out a small box. "It's not much, but—" Maya opened it. Inside was a key, intricately carved, brass, old. "It's from the house in Lincoln Park," Ethan explained. "The original key from 1890. I had it restored, preserved. I thought, I don't know. That house was where we really started building something, where I learned what home felt like. And even though we're here now, creating something new, I wanted you to have a piece of where we began." Maya turned the key over in her hands, feeling the weight of it, the history. "It's perfect," she said. "I love it. And I love you." "I love you too," Ethan said. "Even more than last year, which I didn't think was possible." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights reflect off the lake. Two people who'd been so lonely, they'd forgotten what connection felt like, who'd stumbled into each other through accident, who'd chosen each other through intention, who were building a life that honored both who they'd been and who they were becoming. "You know," Maya said thoughtfully, "I should probably thank the spa attendant who gave me the wrong key that day. She made a mistake that changed my entire life." Ethan laughed. "I tracked her down, actually. Made sure she didn't get fired. Gave her a bonus." "Of course you did," Maya said, shaking her head. "Always fixing things." "Some things," Ethan corrected, kissing her temple. "You fixed the most important thing. You fixed me." 5 years after that accidental meeting, Maya and Ethan hosted a dinner party in their new house. They'd moved from the Tiong Bahru apartment into a beautifully restored shop house in the Katong neighborhood. Ethan had overseen the renovation himself, preserving the historical details while modernizing the infrastructure. Maya had filled it with art, plants, comfortable furniture, the accumulated treasures of their shared life. Emily was visiting from Boston, where she'd just made attending physician. Michael had flown in with his new girlfriend. Maya's parents came, now more comfortable with Singapore, with their daughter's choices, with the life she'd built. A few colleagues from both their workplaces rounded out the group. They cooked together, Maya and Ethan moving around each other in the kitchen with practiced ease. He chopped vegetables while she stirred curry. She made his favorite dessert while he set the table. These small choreographies of partnership, learned over years of choosing each other daily. During dinner, someone asked how they'd met. "Hotel error," Ethan said, grinning at Maya. "Wrong room, right person," Maya added. "I walked into his suite wearing nothing but a towel. Most embarrassing moment of my life, until it became the best thing that ever happened to me." Emily laughed. "I remember the phone call. Ethan called me completely panicked, saying he'd met someone who actually saw him. I told him not to screw it up." "Did he screw it up?" Michael asked. "Almost," Maya said. "Multiple times. We both did. Turned out building something real was harder than either of us expected. But worth it, Ethan added, taking her hand. Completely worth it. After dinner, after everyone had left, they sat on their small balcony overlooking the street. Singapore hummed around them, warm and alive, a city they'd both made home. "Do you ever miss Chicago?" Maya asked. "Sometimes," Ethan admitted. "The seasons, mostly. Snow, the architecture center, deep dish pizza." He paused. "But not enough to want to go back. This is home now. Your home." Maya leaned into him. "I never thanked you properly, for the job, for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself, for making space in your life for my dreams." "You've thanked me every day," Ethan said, "by choosing to stay, by building this life with me, by loving me when I didn't think I was lovable." They sat quietly, comfortable in each other's presence. Ethan thought about the man he'd been 5 years ago. Lonely, isolated, convinced wealth had made genuine connection impossible. He thought about standing in that hotel suite, holding a stranger's toiletries, feeling hope for the first time in years. Maya thought about the woman she'd been, unemployed, lost, walking into the wrong room at the worst time. Except it hadn't been the wrong room. It had been exactly the right room. Because sometimes disaster looks like destiny. Sometimes embarrassment looks like opportunity. Sometimes walking into the wrong place at the wrong time, wearing nothing but a towel, leads to finding exactly the person you were meant to find. "I'm pregnant," Maya said quietly. Ethan went completely still. "What?" "I found out yesterday. I was going to tell you differently, more romantically, but it felt right to tell you now. Here." She turned to look at him. "Are you happy, or are we ready?" Ethan's eyes were shining. "I'm terrified," he admitted, "and so happy I can't breathe. Are you?" "Happy, I mean." "Terrified and happy," Maya confirmed. "Apparently that's our default state now." They held each other on the balcony, two people who'd been so lonely. They'd forgotten what connection felt like, who'd found each other through accident, who were now creating another person who would be loved fiercely, completely, without reservation. "It's going to be complicated," Ethan said, "balancing careers and parenting, figuring out childcare, making space for another person in our lives." "We're good at complicated," Maya said. "We've been doing complicated successfully for 5 years." "That's true," Ethan agreed. "We are pretty good at figuring things out." That night, lying in bed, Ethan's hand resting protectively over Maya's still flat stomach, they talked about the future, about names and nurseries, and how their parents would react, about how their work would change, how their relationship would evolve, how they'd navigate this next transformation together. "I used to think I was too broken to be loved," Ethan said quietly. "That my wealth and my past had ruined any chance of genuine connection. And then you stumbled into my life and showed me that wasn't true. That I just needed to find someone brave enough to see past the surface." "I was never brave," Maya protested. "I was desperate and embarrassed." "You were brave," Ethan insisted. "You stayed. You argued with me. You refused to let me use money to solve problems that required emotional courage. You made me better. You make me better every day." Maya kissed him softly. "You make me better too. You believed in me when I'd stopped believing in myself. You gave me space to grow. You loved me without trying to control me." They fell asleep like that, talking about the future, about the baby, about the life they were building. Two people who'd started with nothing but an embarrassing accident and had built something real, something lasting, something worth protecting. Ethan Cross had designed hundreds of buildings, created spaces that made people feel at home all over the world. But the home he'd built with Maya, the life they'd created through intention and courage and daily choice, was his masterpiece. Maya Chen had spent her career restoring broken, beautiful things, bringing damaged art back to life. But the most important restoration she'd ever done was helping Ethan restore his belief in himself, in connection, in the possibility of being loved for who he was instead of what he provided. Lucas, from that story you heard at the beginning, believed he was too big to be loved, that his body made genuine connection impossible. Ethan believed he was too wealthy to be loved, that his money made genuine connection impossible. Both men were wrong. The problem was never being too much. The problem was finding someone whose heart was big enough to love all of you, someone brave enough to see past the surface, someone who chose you not despite your complications, but because of your whole, messy, beautiful, real self. And maybe that's the truth we all need to learn, that we're not too much, not too broken, not too complicated. We just haven't yet found the person big enough, brave enough, real enough to love us completely. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Comment where you're listening from. And if you felt it was really worth it, consider becoming a member to get early access to upcoming stories. Your support makes all the difference and helps us continue creating stories that remind us we're all worthy of love, of connection, of someone who sees us clearly and chooses us anyway.